I know what you're thinking. What is a Ferrari doing here? Not here in the middle of the desert in the UAE, but here on this channel. Now, Ferraris aren't prudent, they're not frugal, and they're usually found on a rarefied end of the consumer advice spectrum where their only real company is requests for private space travel. But more than anything else, Ferraris are custodians of car culture. They're the reason petrol heads get out of bed. And they're about as much fun to dissect and talk about as they are to drive. It's like you don't necessarily need to be a Premier League football player to enjoy football. In the same way, anything worth starting is worth starting with a Ferrari. Right, so here we've got a very typical Ferrari steering. Their racing heritage is given away almost instantly because, well, this is quite a busy looking steering. You've got everything you need immediately here because Ferrari really don't want you to take your hands off the steering at any point while driving. So you've got the direction indicators, you've got a start stop button, you can tweak the suspension to a customized setting, and then here this is the business end of the steering. It's the Moneycontrol dial, and it's got 5 settings. You've got from wet, comfort, sport, race, and if you're really brave, ESC off. All of them are in an increasing order of extreme, with the electronic nannies being loosened more and more as you go further up. Sport is ideal if you really want to have some fun on public roads, and then in race you go to a racetrack and hoon this about like a total sports car. But enough talking. There's a 3.9 litre twin turbocharged V8 right under that hood, and there's really only one way to find out what it's good for. I put it in sport, and here we go. Now, despite buffeting, this here is a twin turbocharged Ferrari, so quite a departure from the age where it was almost a given that a Ferrari is going to be naturally aspirated. But with the Portofino Modificata, what Ferrari's done is put new speed sensors inside the turbocharger, so it spools that much faster. And the difference is, frankly, it makes no difference because the way this thing takes off, it just has that free revving nature that Ferraris are famous for. And it also gets a new 8-speed dual clutch gearbox as opposed to the 7-speed that the former Portofino had. So all in all, it has more in common with the exquisite Ferrari Roma. It's the only other real competition as far as front engine Grand Touros go, because honestly, who else can compete? The M suffix in the Portofino M stands for Modificata, which is Ferrari's way of signaling that the changes aren't just skin deep. This is a car that exceeds the standard Portofino in pretty much every way. For starters, you have more aggressive air intakes up front, a new drag reduction vent near the wheel arches, and a redesigned exhaust system which makes it Euro 6 compliant while also giving it a neater looking rear end. Most importantly, it's up on power, low on emissions, and gets Ferrari's 8-speed dual clutch gearbox, which is lighter and just a little bit quicker. Well, I'm not sure what the ultimate test of a Ferrari is, but the ultimate test of a Grand Tourer is to just be able to do regular things. Travel extremely long distances. They exist very abundantly between Dubai and Sharjah, so that's what we're doing right now. And that gives me a little time to ponder over just what I really like about this car. And of course, being a Ferrari, there's plenty to like. It does feel very livable because one of the things that it has to do is that it has to be a great everyday car. That's the point of a Portofino. It's fun on the milk and eggs run. It's supposed to be great when the weather is fantastic. It's supposed to be a great weekend car, and that's kind of what makes it more appealing than anything else. It's because it has to straddle so many roles together at the same time. It doesn't just have to be a great GT car, it has to be a great everyday car, it has to be a great supercar, because let's face it, it's got 620 horsepower. So we are clearly in supercar territory now. Let's go with what we really like. This 3.9 litre twin turbocharged engine. Now, I know twin turbocharging is a bit of a sore spot, particularly with purists and enthusiasts. But yes, I'm with you. I like naturally aspirated engine as much as the next Ferrari fan. But we have to realize that the naturally aspirated engine, especially V10s and V12s, are a near extinct, species. So taking this as, even if we take it as a stopgap measure between electric and naturally aspirated, this is about as good as it gets, really. It's smooth, it's creamy, it's high revving, it goes all the way up to 7,500. I mean, it's only Ferrari engines can work their magic in that sort of sense. It just feels like a frenzied dream sequence for the most part, and the dream sequence gets over. The sun goes down, you're gonna hand the car back over, and that's fine. But what stays with you is really the little stuff. It's the way this thing turns into corners. I mean, the steering is just so precise. It just reads the surface so well, and you put it in race mode, it's got like just animal reflexes. It just turns its head like a Labrador that's seen a squirrel. Whew. That's the hard part. Sun's setting down and I'm already running late, so more apologies to Ferrari again. I had to return this car, and that's just downright painful. It is. It really physically hurts the notion of parting with this and ending this day. However, our search for Grand Tourers is not over. I know that it's a burning question that's just at the bottom of everyone's soul, and I'm here to offer human service really in trying to find that out for all of you. So keeping that in mind, the search isn't exactly over, because there is one more car, the only car that is served as a competition for this, the only car that can possibly surpass the Portofino, and that's coming up very soon. This, of course, is the Ferrari Roma. Gorgeous, elegant, timeless. Any adjective you can throw at it, any superlative, it doesn't really seem enough, because honestly, I can't recall in the last couple of decades where a front engine Grand Touring Ferrari has been this good looking. It's got a certain timeless elegance to it, aspects which are throwback to 60s era Ferraris, which in my opinion were the greatest. It's the right amount of sensational, it's the right amount of finely boned, voluptuous, sculpted, and yet very overtly sporty. So the big question is this the grandest of all Grand Tourers? And its closest competition being the Portofino M. Which one of them is the right Grand Tourer for you? Only one way to find out. With the Roma, Ferrari aims to rope in a fresh set of clients. Those who have, for reasons unknown, been impervious to the charms of their ballistic V12 powered front engine Ferraris. Yet, despite its classical beauty, the Roma is a product of technical brilliance. Its chassis is light and playful, and it feels just as comfortable pottering around town as it does being hooned around the bends. The Roma manages to be an intoxicating blend of fast, friendly, flickable, and soulful. It thrills but doesn't intimidate. It delights but never coddles you. Yes, it shares a lot with the Portofino M, but Ferrari has managed to give the cars very distinct personalities, with the Portofino's folding roof serving as a wedge that separates the two. So, as far as the all-important Grand Touring impressions go, it's hard to see it getting better than the Roma. And I originally thought that the Portofino, being more compact and being just more lively, would win that, but there's just something about the way this car operates. It's just incredible. Cornering is flat, but not hardcore hypercar flat. This is still very comfortable. I just drove around almost 200 kilometers getting here, and not even a shred of fatigue. So really, it's hard to sometimes see why anyone would even want to join the hypercar club if they don't actually live at a racetrack. Put it in sport, and it gets just a little more playful. It's more eager to fishtail than the Portofino, and it doesn't really take much. However, it also snaps back into position. It's just poetically. So there is that. With the Roma, Ferrari has decided to take a more traditional Grand Touring approach. Gone is the fire-breathing, naturally aspirated V12 we've come to expect in Ferrari GT cars, and instead we have a twin-turbo 3.9-litre V8. The same one found in the Portofino M, making the same amount of power. However, that's where the similarities end, because the Roma packs a very different flavour. There's something in particular that the Roma and rear-wheel drive GTs do very well, is they always remain playful on the limit and yet so perfectly in control. Now, Jebel Jess is one of the greatest driving roads in the world, and driving in one of the greatest GT cars in history, well, I could definitely use a lot more days like these. Even in race mode, there's only the illusion of skill. The Ferrari is very much in control. It's only with the ESC off that things get really hairy, and I would not recommend that anywhere off a racetrack. Is this the V8's swan song? I'm not sure. The way things are changing, it's entirely possible that the next one will be a V6 hybrid, and I have no doubt that Ferrari will find a way to add performance into that, the kind that just keeps you coming back to the prancing horse time and time again. As sublime as it is to drive, the Roma isn't without flaws. In its effort to marry classic elements with the hypermodern, Ferrari has opted for touch-enabled surfaces almost everywhere. This is fine on the 16-inch center console, but on the steering, the lightest brush of the palm results in voice activation being triggered, and that can get a bit tiresome after a point. That said, the Roma is a superb place to be in. It's all four-suede and leather with a central tunnel that seems as finely carved as the rest of the car. Linear speed it just comes so natural to this. But it's not something it prefers. This is the Grand Tourer you like to play with, and it's around the corners that Ferrari's racing background just becomes very apparent, and that essentially what sets apart their Grand Tourers from the others, it's just this pedigree. And the fact that it reflects in its reflexes, in the way the steering responds to the tarmac and to the surroundings. I mean, it's just so poised and so sudden with its movements that it's just constantly on the ball. And that inspires so much confidence, even from the most average driver. However, if getting the tail out isn't your thing, by all means, go for an all-wheel drive. Where the Roma feels more like a celebration of grand touring, a worthy spiritual successor to the likes of the 550 Maranello, the Portofino M is very much its own car. More fun than frantic. Its weekend party-goer vibe is a tad different from the Roma, which has greater red carpet appeal. Either way, you'd be splitting hairs trying to pick the better GT car. The Roma can technically seat more people, while the Portofino M is arguably more fun on a sunlit, winding road. Both appeal to very different senses and sensibilities. But one thing's for sure, in an ideal world, you'd want both in your garage.